Afternoon, everyone, or good morning or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'd like to welcome you to this Business Leader Dialogue focused on product innovation by design, competing in the women's market. My name is Ijoma Mwagu, and I lead the Gender and Sustainability work stream of our project at Lagos Business School, the Sustainable and Inclusive Digital Financial Services project. So I'd like to welcome everybody and also acknowledge the presence of my team. We are a real team behind this project, and it's a team effort, and I will at points call on my colleagues if necessary to clarify different parts of the financial inclusion puzzle that we're working on together. So I'd like to welcome my team and all of you here. We really appreciate your presence. And I'd like to invite you as we go along to share. I know you're coming, everybody's coming with a wealth of experience, to also share that experience as a provider trying to reach or contemplating reaching the women's market. Just to give you a sense of, you're all welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just going to move. Okay. These slides are very funny. Okay, here we go. So you're welcome. And today, what we want to do is to explore the women's market as a business opportunity, as well as a policy imperative, but mainly as a business opportunity. And then also explore opportunities for product and service innovation through women-centered design. So we're saying look towards the women market, but also look towards it in a different way from an innovation standpoint. And today's session aligns with what we're trying to achieve through this initiative at LBS, which is enhancing our responsiveness, your responsiveness as providers in designing and delivering products that improve the financial well-being of Nigerians, particularly the poor, women, and rural dwellers, because these represent the core demographics that are excluded from the formal financial system. So that's going to be our focus for today. And then at the end of it, what we're looking at is understanding the drivers, benefits, and challenges of designing financial products for segments of the women's market. And so also, as providers, look critically at how we're providing the processes and systems through which we're providing for women to see if there are any corrective actions we need to think about in the products and services we bring on board, and even in the engagement strategies that we're using to reach women. And we're going to look at tools and techniques related to human-centered design, which emphasizes as the key foundation for our products, services, and engagement strategies, the needs, constraints, and aspirations of women. So I'm going to pause here for a minute and invite Timothy. Is there anything logistically we need to know before we dive into the session?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ijoma. So there are a few things that we need to know. One, if you have any questions or you want to make any contributions in the course of the presentation or after the presentation, you can just indicate by using the raise hand button, which is in Zoom, and we'll be looking at that part of Zoom and ensure that we call you we respond to your questions, or we'll call you to make your contributions. You can also drop your comments in the chat section. Once you have a comment you want to make and you don't want it to slip, you can go ahead to drop them in the chat section. And when we're doing the facilitate discussions, we'll take those contributions as well. So that's it for now, Dr. Ejema. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Timothy, for those housekeeping notes to bear in mind as we move along. Thank you, everyone. And our starting point today is the gender gap. As we know, globally, women lack access to financial services, particularly formal financial services. As you know, the World Bank's Global Findex reports, over 50% of women, half of the adult female population, half of the population in most countries, female, are not included, particularly emerging markets, are not included within the formal financial system, as the Global Findex database has reported. And in many countries, we see upwards of 7 to 9 percentage points of exclusion of the female population, which is quite alarming. And even in Nigeria, where we've had some improvements prior to 2017, at the moment, EFINA reports that 58.9% of Nigerian women are financially, only 58.9% of Nigerian women are financially included within the formal system and informal inclusion, as compared with 67.4% of men. So roughly about 8 to 8.5 percentage points of a gap. So there is a crucial gender gap. But one thing that is interesting is that on the national and international stage lately, there has been increasing momentum from a range of organizations to bridge this gap. So even from the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals framework, from the G20, African Union, EFINA, LBS, many local actors, international actors, Women's World Banking, a host of organizations are beginning to think about and try to find ways to bridge this gap. And I'm sure you can feel that trend within your own walls of an increasing interest in closing the gender gap in financial inclusion. And we're also getting that feel from the regulatory and policy space. Just yesterday, I was on the panel with the CBN at the e-launch of the framework for advancing women's financial inclusion in Nigeria. So it's a key policy, there's key policy interest in this area, but also alongside that strategic imperative to include women, there's also a business interest in including women. And just as a working definition, we want to think about women's financial inclusion as a situation where women have effective access to financial services. They're able to use those services, so there's an element of usage, and they're able to use a variety of financial products and services that meet their business and household needs. So there must be some level of impact and access and usage. So there are different dimensions to this question. And at the end of the day, we want those products and services into which women are included to take into account the socioeconomic factors and cultural norms that cause financial exclusion in women. Because as you see, as we go along, there are a range of factors that kind of stand in the way of women really accessing meaningfully these financial services. So I talked about financial inclusion as including access, usage, quality. What is it doing in the lives of, is it an appropriate product, services, or service, as well as impact in terms of resilience? Is it building resilience and helping these women to manage risk? So financial inclusion is a multi-dimensional concept in that sense. I'm seeing some activity in the chat room. Timothy, do you want to relay those to me? Because these are...
Okay, Dr. Ejema, you can go ahead. I'm sure we can.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we can pull those in later. Okay, so I was talking about the CBN framework that was just launched yesterday. And that framework considering the multidimensional aspect of financial inclusion, that framework looks at measures that can be taken to address the different dimensions of financial exclusion that women face. So these are some of the key areas to tackle this issue that the CBN has identified. So those areas, and if you notice, there are some that are indicated. The first three are indicated in red as urgent, near-term measures that the CBN is looking at happening in the ecosystem in order to push to close the gender gap, essentially. So they're looking at measures to support account opening by women on a large scale, measures to expand financial and digital literacy for low-income women, and then also expand delivery channels to serve women closer to home, and mandate the development of systems of gender disaggregated data collection, and also create an enabling environment, number 5, for the expansion of DFS and fintech, which integrates a gender focus. And there was also discussions around developing financial products and services that meet the needs of women sustainably, which is the conversation we're having today. What do these products, how can we think differently about these products, and for what women segments, and can this be a sustainable effort? And then the final two areas, pillars, if you want to call them, in advancing women's financial inclusion, deal with promoting the expansion of DFS and fintech solutions, as well as building a culture of women's leadership and staffing in financial institutions and agencies, which is an area that sometimes kind of falls on the wayside when we're really focused on, creating products and rolling them out. So a culture of women's leadership and diversity and representation within provider institutions is also a key element. So as we move along to look at the barriers that women face, it makes it clearer why these are the imperatives that have been outlined by the CBN to drive women's financial inclusion. And it's important, I think, to think about why. It all started, there's a book called, really good book by Simon Sinek that it's called Starting with the Why. We don't know, we never know what we're not often motivated to achieve, to meet targets if we're not grounded in the why and the purpose for which we're doing what we do. And I found this really interesting quote that we can think about as to why women's financial inclusion matters. So, so this quote says that there's a strong connection between women's access to financial products and services and greater opportunity, not only for the woman herself in terms of her own dignity and her own potential, but also her family and her community, but really for the nation as a whole. Speaking of family, my toddler just arrived. Give me 1 second to get him to his father. 1 second. Thank you for that. So you see live the things that we're talking about here. Okay. So we're talking about the why. Why should we push for financial inclusion for women? So we talked about it being something that can enhance her own dignity and potential and opportunities, but also that it can enhance her family and community and the nation as a whole. Women, research has shown, as this quote captures, that women are far more likely than men to spend money that they have under their discretion on the education of their children, the healthcare of their family, and improving their housing. And those are the kinds of development changes that can really have long-term intergenerational impact. So that is why women's financial inclusion is also important for sustainable development. And on your right, you can see some of the key SDG goals that financial inclusion can support us to get closer to, from zero hunger to decent work and economic growth. But I'd also like to emphasize here that it's not financial inclusion alone. Research has also shown that economic empowerment is a key element to financial inclusion, because if women don't have resources, money, assets, and opportunities, jobs and skills, it then becomes difficult for them to even have the money to say that they're being active in a formal financial system. So that's one broader framework that we need to bear in mind, and that we'll also see come into play when we talk about the barriers that women face. So now that we've talked about why, so why should FSPs bother? Why should they invest in women, in capturing this new market segments? And here we're talking about low-income women, because there is already some footprints within our own landscape in Nigeria of FSPs that are creating products for women. However, what we see is that there could be more room for products and services, as well as engagement strategies that actually look at low-income women who are earning somewhere below 40,000 Naira a month. So there's an opportunity to capture these new market segments in an increasingly competitive landscape. When I was growing up, you could count on your fingers the number of financial service providers that existed, and it was mainly traditional banks that were there. But now it's a crowded space, so competitively, there is a race to capture new market segments, and women represent a key part of the untapped customer groups that are there in the market. And increasingly, even in poor households, what we find is that within the limited resources that are there, these women are at the forefront of consumer spending. So it's no wonder that many of our FMCGs, those that are doing things like Maggie and Knorr, they are targeting women, because they know that it's the women that are in the market and making these purchases. So there is a business case, and not only a charity case, but a business case. So part of the issues that we've also thought about women as, okay, a vulnerable group, yes, but then they're more than that. And increasingly, for us to make, as providers, make headway in this space, we need to start thinking about more defining a business case to serve them as customers, because there is some potential here. So we're going to take a quick poll, IDT, please help me. We're going to take a quick poll to just get a sense of what the priority, within your own institutions, what the priority is for serving this market. So please, could you run that poll so we can get that sense? Launch the poll, please. So please go ahead and vote. How would you rate the interest of your financial institution to create products that meet the needs of low-income women? Okay. Okay, it's moving. Okay, 75% have voted. Okay, go ahead. We're almost there. We're almost at 100%. I'm going to end the poll when we hit the 2-minute mark. So if you haven't voted, please go ahead and do that. Okay. So has everyone voted? Is anybody trying to put in a vote? I'm going to close the poll now. Okay, it's moving, almost 100%. Well done, guys. Almost at 100%. This is how elections should be. Full voting. Okay, one more and we hit 100. Okay. All right. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the polling now. Sharing the results. Can we see the poll results? So I'm seeing 17% very low interest, 52% moderate interest, and 35% very high level of interest. And I'm curious, can you share, so predominantly we're seeing moderate interest. Can you share why this is the case? But we're not doing this one right now. Okay, so can you share why? Why? The why behind your financial institution being moderate? Because it seems moderate in the middle is where we land. And where there's very low interest, feel free, use the chat function, or also you could raise your hand and unmute to share that. I'd like to hear back why. Okay. Are we there? Anybody want to share their perspective on why? Stephen, go ahead, please.
Okay, yeah, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So for me, I feel my opinion is basically because it's moderate in the sense that most of the services and the products that are being offered today in the market by operators basically they are not like specifically channeled towards women focused, the kind of, so it's like, and then the way the perception is in the market, like this thing is like, it's only men that are able to do it and all that. So for me, that's why most the feedback is low, you know, kind of. And then when it comes to the marketing, the marketing basically, there's no particular there are no strategies that are aimed at focusing directly at women in terms of marketing this thing. So it's just like there, can you do it? You have to go to the bank. This is like, it's more like a man's world, you know, and all that. So for me, that's why it's like that, basically. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Wonderful points there. And I'm seeing some other hands raised, and I also want to acknowledge some of the share outs too on the chat. So in addition to what Stephen has said about there being this sense of it being a man's world, there's also this idea that the marketing infrastructure, you know, the things that are behind it are not really in place. So, and on the chat, Chisom was talking about uncertainty, not being very sure of the economic returns, and also being indifferent, you know, until proven otherwise. So there's a bit of, should I say, lukewarmness just about it, and just not being ready to get into something that's step into murky waters that they're not sure of. And I saw two other hands raised. Okay. Timothy, can you help me identify those? Because I don't see everybody's.
Okay. So, Stephen has spoken. I think the other person is Bamidele.
Bamidele.
Yes, thank you very much, Doc. So for me, I actually I
Okay, Bamidele, you can go ahead with your contribution.
Thank you, Timothy. So I voted for moderate because the truth is a few organizations are beginning to realize that there's a need for some segmentation in the product offerings and marketing efforts out there. But so in that regard, some are consciously or intentionally creating products and all this necessary appeal to the gender that, in discussion. However, there's still a lot to be done. So you have discussions around striking a balance between profitability and a bit of CSR, because for them it's like, why can't I just do vanilla for everybody? Why do I need to do a big segment? So it's moderate. There are a few efforts out there to actually identify the women segments and do something different for them, but there's still a whole lot more to be done.
Okay, thank you for that, Bamidele. Very great points about segmentation. A few efforts to do that, as well as trying to strike a balance between profitability and CSR. Thank you for that. And there were other hands raised as well. Let me see if I can see them on my dashboard. Timothy, can you see? Oh, I see Obed. Obed.
Okay, yes. Obed, yes.
Okay, so thanks so much. I think Bamidele captured most of the points I want to make. One, I actually voted for moderate, but I think it's just because of the fact that these days we deliberately want to think some of our marketing materials just to show that women that are women. So it's women trying to financial services or women serving as an agent, for example. So it is becoming deliberate in most organizations. So I would say in terms of interest, yes, is there. But in terms of really doing the real work of trying to bring women, because if you look at the pool, I don't know if the pool is a representation of what is actually happened, because from the pool, it means that only 17% really is just saying that we are really doing much at all. You understand? So I think it's a real reflection of what's happening on the ground. I doubt, except maybe the next year from banks, from a financial wise, that is really improved quickly. But I think there is still a lot to be done in terms of systems and products, how products are designed for specifically women. I know there's some loan products in the market are designed in a way for women, but I've not really seen much deliberate effort in terms of women first solution. It is very high in the northern part of Nigeria. Yes, if you go to the market, for example, you will likely see most of people, even in the market, which is a little bit different in the south, are still men than the markets, in the marketplaces. So you try to include people that they have some form of cultural norms that might not allow them to come out to really interact with people. How do you want to design a product for women who might be living in I've lived out before, and you have this barrier they are inside. How do you want to design solution for them? So I don't think that effort in come in. I think those are some of the things that we to start thinking about. I was not in the session yesterday. Probably that framework will be able to address some of this stuff. But I think that those are some of the things we need to be very deliberate. Then if we want to really be very deliberate, I've actually worked with some other organizations for around this, and funny enough, it's going to be more going to be like a CSR, like Bamdele mentioned. It's going to be like a kind of form of intervention, because to be very sincere with you, at the moment, it might not be profitable to start this service. To start this, you cannot defend to your management at the outset, but maybe eventually become something that's going to be profitable. But there's a level of intervention that need to come in, either from government, from development finance institutions, and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you for those very rich thoughts. Quite a number of points you raised there, Obed. Points about, yes, the knowledge is picking up in industry. And then, however, the real work of actually designing for women and rolling it out is still a challenge. And you did say that is something that we need to be deliberate about if we're going to think about crossing barriers, like demand side barriers you indicated, like situations where you don't even have physical access to those women that you're trying to design for, say in parts of the North where their mobility is limited physically, and banks and financial service providers can actually see these markets. So great points there. And I saw Jane's hands raised. So Jane, will take yours, and then we'll now move along to other segments. So Jane, of the presentation. So Jane, go ahead, and then we move along.
Thank you very much. So because I think most businesses are out there to make money, I doubt if any business is just out there to churn out CSR initiatives. So if I were to come out with a product, I guess the first thing is to present a business case that will convince the executives that the thing is out there to make money. If a special product for women is not out there to make money, trust me that that initiative is not going to survive. So except I'm talking to maybe politicians or government who will see this thing as a social intervention. If yes, something that is specific for women is going to make money, then a yes. But if the product specifically for women is not necessarily going to make money for over the one that is a vanilla, then I doubt if any business is just going to go and approve it. So that is my that's my contribution. The question I was going to ask is more like answering the question with a question: why women? Why not for everybody? Why not for children? Why not for men? When I'm not out there when I'm not charity. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Okay, I like that contribution, Jane, because it's a real, it brings us into the reality of, providers' mindsets, where at the end of the day, it's a business. It's a bank, it's a financial service provider, it's a microfinance institution. That business case has to be established. Why women? And then the interesting thing to add there is that in many cases, that thought, providers haven't really, in many cases, kind of taken that deliberate step that Obed talked about to say, okay, I want to reach out to this market. I want to understand this market to even start to see if there's a business case. There's a sense in which we kind of put women there as, if we want to reach out to them, it's going to be a charity initiative, a CSR. However, have we really taken deliberate steps to see whether there could be some profitability there, doing the real hard work of checking? So that's one thing we want to do. But I like the reality check that you introduced, Jane. And then why women? Yes, there are other vulnerable segments out there. However, as I shared, women are positioned in a way that many times financial inclusion that empowers them, if they're economically powered and financially included, that there's a multiplier effect. So the household, there's research that shows that when women have resources, are financially included, they're able to transact, save, have access to credit, insurance, it tends to be invested. Their resources tend to go to support the education and health of their wards and the feeding of their families. They spend more basically on household. So there's a special interest there, and a special interest in that they are excluded predominantly. And being adults, there's productivity that is lost, if you want to think of it economically, when half of your population is not as economically nimble, if you would say, as possible. Thank you for that. And I see some other comments in the chat. Chijoke says that sometimes it may have to do with the business model of the institution involved and what their client focuses on. Again, so this is that, you know, so for some providers, it's not a priority. They've already chosen this is where we want to focus. And then again, while some organizations do not want to be seen as sexist and attend to the needs of women as a nice to have, some others have a core focus on developing products tailored to women and their empowerment. Good one, Chijoke. You're right. Sometimes the business model, when I think of your institution, for example, grooming center, they say the client is queen, right? So that very business model of a microfinance institution is one that is designed for economically active and poor women. So sometimes it may not just be an institutional priority or an institutional focus. So that's the reality. But then where there is scope, we want to include women within existing business models. And even if it's not your core target segment, there is something to be said for being gender inclusive as an overriding framework, so that female customers who are accessing general products are also able to have a good time of it, and it actually is useful to them and appropriate to them as well. So thank you for those thoughts. Quite a lot of good comments in the chat. Thank you. All right. So we're going to move now from the poll. Thank you for those thoughts. I'm going to. Okay. So so what we're urging, where it is a priority, it could be a priority for providers, is to move beyond gender neutral. Because from some of your responses, we can see that sometimes it's not a deliberate action of an organization saying we want to be sexist, we want to exclude women. Many times it's not intentional. What it is, in many cases, where the business model permits, is that many of the products and services that we churn out simply default to the male as the picture of who the user is, and reflecting also the reality in many communities that it is men who are predominantly financially included and are visibly using these services. So what tends to happen is that products and services are then by default designed for them. And the real test really for the gender integration in our products is whether it actually begins to address women's needs, their stage of life, their level of economic empowerment, financial goals, and responsibility. So that's what it would mean to step beyond a gender neutral standpoint in terms of our existing products or products that we intend to design to focus on the women's market. And you see this thing going on in some of the products that are already on the market, where providers have said, okay, let's create a product for women. Sometimes you find that the focus is often, sometimes, you know, usability, impact, and all that. But sometimes the focus is on the form rather than the substance. So you can see that, okay, in the marketing is more colorful, flowery and all that. And you see this in a lot of the products. This designed, for example, for middle-class professional women. But then you also find that not only are providers generally not thinking about women as a unique market segments, but also not thinking about the group that we're talking about today, which is low-income women. So there's a need to take those two steps of thinking of women segments as a demographic, and then also thinking, okay, low-income women, because women are not homogeneous or a monolith, but are, you know, made of different types of women at different stages in their lives even. So that idea of intersectionality, how do we think of women's segments and design to meet their needs and aspirations? So that further deliberate step has to happen. In line with that, there's a recognition that women have complex and unmet financial needs. And when financial, so in many cases, a lot of, when you think about the products that are coming out of microfinance institutions, for example, a lot of it is microcredit, which is good. And some are also veering into savings, which are good as well. But then there are other areas that we could look at as well. Pensions, even insurance, although insurance in Nigeria right now is there's a very low uptake. In fact, 2% for men and about 1% for women, very low uptake. But there are possibilities there that could tie to the needs of women, their complex needs. In terms of their aspirations, personal aspirations, and even familial aspirations. Like I remember in the chat, someone was talking about how women are saving for their children, sometimes saving for healthcare, you know, so there's a lot of possibility there. So, and Jane, this is on your question, why women? Why women, right? One level of that answer is a realization that, okay, women's needs in relation to men are somewhat different, unique, common. There's some commonalities, but there's some unique areas as well that we need to tap into as an opportunity to help and an opportunity, business opportunity. So one is that financial literacy and knowledge, digital literacy, for example, is different. Women show a much lower level of financial and digital literacy. Many times, this low literacy or low numeracy is also a reflection of how the level of education that women have access to, level and quality of education. So we see differences there, and you know, the needs are different. So it's not just pushing products to these women, but also thinking about how to create within the product opportunities to bridge gaps that exist in terms of how women are interacting with digital technology, as well as know the literacy they have around financial products and services. There are differences in financial behavior. There's research as well that we have worked on at LBS, EFINA, and recently Women's World Banking, that show that women save, even when the resources are meager, they do save. However, lots of their saving is in informal platforms, sometimes through saving groups, family members sometimes. And there's a gender pay gap. So men earn 2 times as much monthly as men on average. And even when you think about businesses, the World Bank recently published a report where it showed that men's businesses were 34% more profitable than women's, you know, in terms of SMEs and, you know, the smaller businesses that women tend to do. And when we think about life stages, women tend to take more career breaks. They have shorter working lives, and with that, they're often not able to save a massive pension, and to save for later years. And upon that, they tend to live longer, which is a good thing, right? I mean, well, it's good to live long, I mean. However, the reality in terms of what we've seen on the ground is that their needs differ, because they do tend to live longer than the male counterparts. So it is a case that many times the products that are on the ground don't take account of these nuances. And what we hear from women is this statement at the bottom of the page, where they're like, they look at the products and they say, with all these things going on, these products are not for me, because many times they're a bit out of step with their needs and experiences. And they're smart, people use what works for them. And here I've outlined some of the barriers. So some of these barriers you've surfaced when we're talking earlier about, the provider mindset and actions towards providing to this to the women's market. So you talked about some of these barriers on the supply side. And the research and activities have tended to focus on demand side constraints that women face, like a lot of the finance studies on access to finance look at these demand side constraints, which have come up in that generally women, one of the key barriers that even the CBN emphasized yesterday is that women have irregular income sometimes, or are not economically active in a sense of earning. So this creates a barrier, because financial services then become unaffordable and unsustainable for them. And they're also indirect costs, because it's not just a matter of getting to a financial an outlet to access financial services, but in many areas, like in the rural areas where a lot of these women live, and maybe the next bank or ATM or agent is a ride that will cost 200 naira, 500 naira, which is a huge outlay for many of these women, considering their low income and irregular volatility around that income sometimes. And then education, which we've talked about, literacy barriers. And then there are key barriers around identification, which, in the policy framework as well, it was emphasized how, if we're really going to, as number one priority, get more women banked to open accounts, be in the formal financial system, then we have to figure out how to give them identification, for them to have access to easy identification, meet those requirements. And there has been some movement there recently on the regulatory side by, creating lower tier ID, KYC requirements that bring women in. And then there's a key area of trust in formal financial systems, because many women are saying, this is not for me. But many are also saying, I don't trust the banks. I don't trust formal financial institutions. And research-wise, we've also found that women are registering lower trust in formal financial institutions, and sometimes for good reason, because even if people are not numerate or literate in terms of how they can read, I can assure you that they have a very sophisticated understanding based on experience of the environment around them, and why they would trust or not trust an institution, a financial institution. In some of the recent customer research activities we've done at LBS with financial service providers, and I have some of my people here who can testify to that. Chijike, do you want to share with us what some of the women were saying about even accessing loans from formal financial institutions, some of the really the analysis that they were sharing with you out on the field? So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Joma, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, just as Ijoma said, we recently had to go to the field just to get a feel of the pulse of our clients as to, you know, what they think a new product will be like. I mean, if it's going to be digital, of course, it's going to be a digital product, but we're looking at, you know, what avenues do we want to sell the product across them so that it'll be easy for them to get onboarded and also to use the product. So there were two things that they said. One of them, a 55-year-old lady, said that, I mean, she has a tablet, she's smartphone savvy, but she says that each time, you know, she tries to get a loan or, you know, process a loan application, list of requirements, KYC things, you know, it's kind of like burdensome for her, and she doesn't have the strength or energy to always be being physically present at the branches, you know, to get all these things done. If she could be able to do that right from her app, that would have been nice. The other lady who spoke to us, a 39-year-old, well, call it, if you may, a long reach person. You know, let's get down to the real nitty gritty, because most of them are into all this multi-level marketing scheme. So she said that, well, for her, she doesn't have any incentive to reach out to a financial institution where the impetus to save has been greatly eroded. So if you are going to charge me between 18 to 25 or 20 something percent to get a loan, but you're going to pay me 1.25% on money that I save with you, I mean, where is the empowerment? Where is the strength that I need to grow from where I am to achieve my financial dreams or opportunities, as the case may be? So those were, you know, the two that really stood out for me at the survey we had with our clients. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that experience, because we sometimes develop products or approach the market assuming that is a tabula rasa, a white, clear whiteboard. However, there's sophisticated analysis going on there, so people know more than we sometimes assume. And they have often a good reason for not trusting or accessing these services. So it's good to understand that. So some of the perspectives and approaches to product development we'll talk about in the other segments of this dialogue. We'll sort of look at that. How do you unearth unearth the constraints that women might face, or the just their needs, you know, and work that into the product development process. So there are these demand side constraints and supply side constraints which women face, and that could serve as barriers to financial inclusion. The fact that we haven't, in some cases, made the deliberate effort to know them can present a barrier, because in that case, we're not able to deliver gendered services, gender-tailored services and products, and even marketing messages that speak to the, you know, this demographic of poor women who are often in rural areas. And sometimes the banking hours are a limit, you know, when you think about the fact that economically active women are spending time on their farms or in the marketplace from 9 to 5 when the bank is open. You're not serving them if that product, if that financial product cannot meet them where they are. So even banking hours, and I've even seen in our research, things like even the doors, you know, the doors that are in front of our banks, the doors, you know, people saying, women saying, I'm carrying my baby on my back, I can't even enter that door, I'll get trapped. You know, so even physical infrastructure can in a way serve as a barrier. Collateral and identification requirements. Often women, for different a host of reasons, may not have the kind of assets that are accepted as collateral in our institutions. And then even the culture, as we noted earlier, can serve as a barrier to access, whether our people approach to people and customer service is even women friendly is also something that can present a barrier where it's not. So these are areas that might present, and I want to emphasize here that there are broader issues. So financial inclusion barriers that we've outlined exist within a broader framework of legal and institutional barriers that women may face. I mean, it's not very far from our mind and experience the fact that in many communities and in many communities, women may not have the legal right to inherit and hold property, or they may just not have they may not just have land rights in some communities. I know, there's been a lot of advocacy and movement in that space, and even in the Southeast in particular, where it was an issue. I know recently there have been legal moves to kind of remove those barriers, but the point is that the legal and political space can also present barriers as well. And then you also mentioned, one of you when we're talking earlier, also mentioned social norms, the way that culture is in a particular area as a potential barrier. And one interesting thing we've done on this project early on is to even engage, because you find that, one interesting thing they say is no matter how scattered or war-torn an area is, you always find Coca-Cola. So early in this project, we engaged and studied delivery mechanisms of FMCGs in terms of, how they deliver, how they even market. So you find that a lot of them take account of these social norms. And I'll give you an example, Toleram, Mini Me, that Mini Me Chin Chin. One interesting thing we found is that they have different packets for different parts of Nigeria. So you have the smiling woman in the South. I'm not sure that would fly, so they don't have that same packaging for the products targeted for the more conservative regions of the North. And I say more conservative regions is because I grew up in parts of the North, and I realized many of us, I think in the South, don't realize that it's a very diverse place. There are Muslims, there are Christians, and there are different sects of Muslims and different cultures there. But the key point is that the culture prevalence in a particular environment can also condition women's access to financial services, and we must bear that in mind when we are designing for them. And we're going to launch another poll just to understand, because as I said, a lot of attention has been paid to the demand side constraints facing women. But as we do this introspection as providers, we also want to start to think about what are the real barriers within my own institution. And even from the feedback you gave earlier in this presentation, you talked about, you could hear different things. Sometimes it's just indifference. Sometimes it's not a priority, which are all fine, but many things are going on. And so in this next poll, we just want to sort of understand what the barriers, the key barriers, it's just a few that are listed there. There are many more, but just, in your mind, what are the key barriers that stand in the way of our institution serving the women's market? So IDT, you're going to help me with this poll on the next slide, please. Okay. So that's our poll. So can we see the poll? So the question is, what are the key supply side barriers your institution faces in serving women? Is it budget, investment limitations, actionable, the lack of actionable gender data? Is it lack of customer value propositions targeting women's segments? Is it low internal buy-in? What is it? And we realize that it could be many things, but then we want to just touch on what the key ones in your mind are. Okay, poll is moving. Okay. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in another 15 seconds. So let's get our votes in. Can we all see the poll? Okay. So I'm gonna end the poll now. Okay. Uh-oh, looks like our poll results. We've cleared our poll results. I'm sorry. But I could see that we had about 45%, you know, a lot of the, okay, there we go. Good, perfect, it's back. So, oh, it relaunched. Apologies, guys. So let's rely on the previous one, or should we vote again? If you don't mind voting again, so we can work with your actual responses, please. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay. So very interesting. So those who, okay, it's moving. Okay, I'm gonna end it in a minute, just so that you can get your responses in. It was interesting how it's moving. Wow. You don't pass behind me. Do that one. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I'll close this shortly. So if you didn't, we're voting again. So please, if you haven't done the second one, please do it again. Okay. All right. So can I close the poll? Is there anybody else who's trying to vote? Can I end it? Is anyone trying to vote that hasn't got theirs in? Okay. I haven't heard anyone, so I'm closing now.
Yes, I think I ended, Dr. John.
Good. So I'm going to share the results now. Very interesting results. So those are our results. Wow. So predominantly, still this, in fact, it's even interesting we did it twice because we're still getting lack of customer value propositions targeting women's segments as a key barrier that stands in the way on the supply side to serving the women's demographic. Followed very closely by an interrelated matter, which is actionable gender data being available. And I believe Jane pointed this out earlier, about, making a business case. For a business case to be established, you need those two things, customer value propositions that target women's segments, as well as actionable data to answer the question of why women? Why? Is it just charity? No, it's a business, but how do we, put some evidence behind it? So thank you all for that. And I believe Lara, you have a comment? I saw your hand raised.
Sorry,
Go
good
ahead.
afternoon. The name is Omolola.
Omolola, sorry.
So
Go ahead,
basically,
please.
from my own observation on the field of both marketing, either in the side of investment or financing, I've noticed that even in the current organization where I work, women tend to, like why I chose that value proposition is because they tend to like get more into the product if it has to do with their children, which is very important to them. So for the lower income earners, because we have classes of women, the HNIs and the middle class and the lowest income earner, we found that most of them, they go into that product because it has the ability to save for their children, and at the end of the day buy them school bags, school books, and so on and so forth. So the other products they go for, the middle class and the HNIs, they go into it because they have the ability or the opportunity to apply for financing later, which is very important for them in terms of growing their business. And at the end of the day is to meet their family needs, because most of them are either supporting their husbands, they're either widows, or single matured people trying to build a future for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that that very insightful comment, Lara. Very much appreciated. So, and you also provided us a picture of how customer value propositions, even for women, depending on their state of life, economic position, also varies. So thank you for that. they need to build to understand really what those drivers are in women's lives and design to that. Thank you. I believe I saw another hand as well. Is there another hand? Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, so yes, so there's a need, and it's good that you bring this up, because the second part of our interaction today is going to focus on, okay, so then what are the tools that would enable us to unpack, you know, what the needs and aspirations of these potential markets are, women markets are, and enable us to design around those, and also get us to start to think about how to unearth actionable gender data to drive the business case as well, because some of that data we already have. So I know that under the CBN framework, so in a conversation with the CBN yesterday, there was this whole segment that focused on the fact that, look, a lot of providers are under law already collecting gender disaggregated data in terms of things like the number of female customers. But the question is now, are they sort of mining it so that it becomes an actionable pot of pool of knowledge for product design? So that's, you know, it was realized that that is a next step that has to happen to report gender data and to now find ways to make it actionable. There's a comment in the chat. Timothy, can you help me read that? I have a whole bunch of windows open on my on my dashboard. Let me.
Sorry, Dr. Ejoma, I think we've taken all the comments.
We've taken all the comments. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
So there's no new comment in the chat. Yes.
All right. Okay. So we have about 30 minutes left on the program, so we're going to move very quickly, and I'd like us to dig deeper into some of the discussions that we've just raised now. And what I want us to dig deeper on is to have a discussion around, okay, recognizing that is not all, with the women's segment is not a priority for all our institutions in terms of their focus. But let's have a conversation about what it would take, right? How might, let me give you the particular question, how might we as providers serve, you know, the women's market better? Let me pull that up just a second. Okay. Let me pull up the question for open discussion as we head to the end. Okay. Okay, how might we, as providers, surmount barriers to reach and serve excluded women sustainably, right? I know the conversation earlier was about profitability, so that's why I put sustainably. It's not just to serve them, but can we serve them sustainably? How might we surmount some of these barriers, some internal, some external, on the demand side, supply side? How might we, from your perspective, surmount these barriers to serve excluded women sustainably? Okay. All right, open discussion. You can use the chat or you can raise your hand. Okay, so let's continue. Any thoughts? I'm going to pause for a minute and continue. Are we there? Okay. All right, so what we'll do, in the absence of, are we still thinking? Okay, so let's, in the absence of any comments or response to this right now, I think we should move along. And then if those thoughts come along, as they would, I'm sure, as we move along, then feel free to share on the chat or raise your hand, okay? So we'll move it and cover the areas we need to cover today. So how might we as providers surmount the barriers to reach and serve excluded women? And the one thing I want to say as we think about approaches is to start us off on this quote by Einstein, which is problems cannot be solved at the same level of consciousness at which they were created. So we talk about, business as usual, how we do our business, how sometimes women are not a priority, or we're just not kind of taking that deliberate step to serve them. So what I'm trying to say is that basically the gender gap and capturing that market in different women's segments will not happen if we kind of do business as usual. So let's in this segment look at different tools and approaches that we can use to start to chip away at the gap and build this business around women's segments. And what you have here, which is the focus of one of our previous DLDs, is the routine customer design, how we produce our products and services from concept to research to analysis to development and launch, right? So this represents the scope of activities that we as providers undertake to bring our products to market. And what we found in our research is that it tends to be we're doing all these activities, however, it tends to be a kind of top-down approach, although we do bring in the insights that we get from the markets in the research phase. It tends to be a lot of our products tends to be, though we're taking into account some of the demographic characteristics of the customers we seek to serve, but sometimes it's not wholly informed by a deep understanding of their needs and aspirations in the way that we're considering today. And the other thing to add is that these products is not that they are successful to some extent. It's not that they are generally failing products. However, what we're saying is that perhaps in the scope of activities we undertake to bring products to market, we want to push a bit further to get more insights, say at the marketing level, where we're looking at what, for example, our competitors are doing, looking at the size of the segments from available data to kind of push or expand the scope of activities further to use rich databases such as the human account to segments, to have a richer view of the segment beyond the demographics of age, marital status, geography, those routine things that feature in our assessment of the market. So what we're saying is that, okay, we get more tools in our box to create more targeted products that may be potentially profitable in serving the women's market. So we're doing all these things and then we analyze and we develop. So at the stage of product development, we could also, one gap that we've identified in our research on the product development process, which my colleague in Chem was a part of, as well as Omotayo, who are here, is that we are also not, as providers, undertaking testing, prototyping, testing, taking as much as we should. Yes, we're using focus groups, sometimes surveys, but we could also do more in terms of taking those products out on the field and testing it against the feedback we can get from the target group to which we're looking at to take these products up So there's a lot that can be done, and even eventually piloting these. So we're doing some activities, but we could do more. That's the point if we want to unlock the women's market using human-centered design techniques. And to speak more about the human-centered design techniques, which sometimes can be called customer design process or even a woman-centered design process. What we do here in this other way of thinking about how we develop our products is to go through 3 big phases where we spend a lot of time in-depth preparation and in identifying the customer groups and also locating potential products, services, and features that might appeal to them, to this demographic, and also testing our hypotheses, because we are human beings and we have our own bubble, if you want to call it, of our assumptions and perceptions that sometimes we project onto the customer. So in customer-centered design, a good part of the prepare phase is actually even testing our hypotheses and assumptions about the market and about the kind of products that can appeal to this market. We've spoken about prototyping, which is a key phase as well. A key phase of kind of digging deeper to understand our customers and testing the concepts that we have in the market, and also developing a kind of low-level prototype, which is an artifact of the product we want to bring to market, and a more refined idea. We then take it out to the customers and get their feedback. And a key thing is that as we are getting their feedback, we are also reworking our initial concepts. And so there's some iteration throughout the whole process, where as we're taking the prototypes out to the customer, we're getting their thoughts and redefining what we bring. And then there's a whole process too around piloting a minimal viable product, and at that point also engaging. You know, we talked about getting internal buy-in, continue to engage and think about how we even pitch the business case we've developed, and the very business case we've developed around the products that we have, that at this point are proven to be desirable to the customers because we've taken the time to study them. So we're piloting with a mind to customer desirability throughout the phases. Customer desirability, feasibility. Is this something that can fly in my organization, or are there, in terms of the capacities and institutional capacities that we have and resources that we have, and even a focus, strategic focus that we have. And then there's a third principle, which is the one that matters quite a lot as well in our books, which is that principle of viability. Is it commercially viable? This innovation that we're trying to bring around an existing product or a new product that we're trying to develop for the women's market. So the whole point really is that human-centered design is an approach that we could use to begin to innovate around the women's market. And one key tool in our arsenal is the human account. So the human account is a very rich database that LBS, it's piloted across the world, and in Nigeria, LBS worked on Dalberg to bring out this very rich database that helps us, because I know when we talked about the poll, in the poll that we did, one key thing, the number one thing, lack of customer value propositions. So that came out as a key thing, and lack of actionable gender data was also an issue. So in terms of our segmentation, right, understanding the woman's market. So one tool that we use alongside in the preparatory stages in our customer-centered design process, human-centered design process, is the human account, which is a very rich database that moves beyond regular demographics of age, gender, education level, and all that, and also includes insights we can get from the we can get from the customer around their behavior, financial behaviors, how they spend, how they prioritize their finances, should income, and all those things that are happening in the very complex financial lives that, you know, we've already discussed that women have. So we also bring in demographic data alongside a financial behavior data to understand how our users act. And then we also bring in, as a third leg of this, psychometrics, so psychological dispositions we try to unearth. So things like, how do our users act? You know, are they risk averse? What's their openness? What's their level of even trust in financial institutions? Because we realize that all these things play into uptake, our desirability of the products and services that we bring into the market. And one thing that has happened with this human account is that we've developed from there archetypes. I'm going to move very quickly because of time. So we've developed archetypes, which is some profiles, some sample profiles of what has been unearthed using using the human account. Okay, we're going to round up. Okay, good. So some archetypes that have been unearthed using the human account that can give us a sense of, okay, who's out there? What segments are out there in the Nigerian market? So this is, and the human account covers male and female, okay? But principally there are some segments in which women appear more. Who's out there, and knowing who's out there will now also tell us, gives us actionable data for what products might suit them. And then we found that there are six segments. There's another page here. I'll move very fast. There's another page here. So there's 6 segments: traditional believers, digital youth, and resilient savers, as well as dependent individualists, confident optimists, as well as questioning cultivators. So women and men are dispersed across these, and a lot of the women we find fall into these dependent individualists, who are mostly young, low middle income rural married women who are self-employed or farm. They're less educated. So all these things that are listed here are characteristics, demographic, behavioral, psychometric, psychological characteristics that help us to potentially know them better and now know what products will suit them. So women predominantly in these dependent individualists. They also fall into traditional believers, which are the more typically, they're religious, married women in rural areas who often farm, less educated. And then, you know, because they have, as I said, developing these segments and working with these segments from the human account helps us know how to serve them. So for example, traditional believers, they are farmers, and for example, a potential product for this market could be something like crop insurance, even though there's low uptake of insurance in the market. But at least knowing these profiles gives us a signal as of what potentially will appeal to them or that can meet their needs. And then we have the third segment in which women predominate, which is the confident optimists, which are mostly young, mid to high income, urban, highly educated, tech savvy, married women who are self-employed or formally employed. So they have a little bit more economic power, highest income, healthier, they're more financially healthy. And in this case, because they are digital savvy in some instances, we can think about, okay, and they have some money, savings products may appeal to them, and also channels like digital DFS can be a way of them possibly transacting and opening formal accounts, for example. So they are the most frequent users of mobile wallets in Nigeria, and they manage their money through formal accounts. They are open-minded. So there are all these are the archetypes we've developed out of the human accounts. But the great thing about that database is that you can test different combinations depending on what target markets you are looking at. So I want to end on this note. Here we are. And we've shared some insights from your experience, from our research as well. And these are some lessons that have surfaced. So there are things we know that you could use in building a business case for serving women or modeling your products and services that we know from our research at LBS and from the research of partners such as EFINA, the design group IDEAL, a range of organizations in Nigeria across the world who have, from their research and experiences around the world, let us know that the ways that we can really gain ground in this market of low-income women is to think about minimizing barriers. Some of the barriers we talked about around identification, identification in our formal institutions, and even also methods of delivery that may be more suited to the women's market, such as taking the service to her, because we know that the women are time poor, and we're spending it as women, spending a good chunk of our time. Many married or women who have families spending a big chunk of time, even those who don't have children, for example, still in many cases, social norms cast women as the caregivers. They're sometimes looking after elderly parents. So because of these constraints, we've learned that for women, we want to think about services that come to her, whether digitally or physically through agents. And we've also learned that female agents are very good in terms of building trust and even having access to those people, those women sometimes who, due to social norms, are not physically accessible to us. So marketing also matters to bridge emotional distance, that the messages that we're seeing on our billboards, flyers, on the products and how we define them and communicate them also speak to our demographic. And gender disaggregated data, looking at that and working with that enables us to know more about how to serve women. So these are generally some thoughts, other thoughts around serving the women's market. And then finally, product options. So as you unearth your customer, your target segment of women you want to serve, it becomes apparent, from speaking to them, human-centered engagement, working from their own experience, what services might appeal to them. And because of the barriers that women face, it could be basic or low-fee accounts or savings accounts. And this is some recommendation that's also coming out of the CBN if we're going to get to ensure that measure number one of ensuring that women open accounts en masse, then it's got to be the barriers to identification and to account opening in terms of cost have to be low. And then also thinking about savings and credit, how do we use, if the demographic, if it suits the demographic, how do we use, for example, digital financial services to bridge the gap in access? And then other things, and it's possible to even bundle different product features into one. I know organizations that are doing already microcredit to low-income women and are now adding on savings. So there are different combinations that are possible, but the key thing is, in your words, taking deliberate action and kind of moving beyond an uncertainty about how to serve this market to an intentionality that will enable us to know the customer better, expand the scope of our activities on a product development side so that we can actually develop products that are empathic and appropriate to the women's segment, and products that also have a potential, and I know they do have a potential to have impact, to be gender transformative, as we say. And please know that we're here as a resource for you on that journey, but it's really a journey worth taking, not because it's charity, but because there's business potential here. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'd like to end on that note and turn over to Prof. To wrap us up. But I'd like to pause for a minute. We do have to hear your thoughts. I mean, it's good that we've heard along the way, we've interacted, but I would like to hear, your thoughts for 2 or 3 minutes. I believe we do have that time. We do. We'd really like to hear your thoughts, and then invite Prof to wrap up for us. Thank you. Any hands? We can use the chat. We can talk. We can raise our hands, please. Okay. Okay, Prof, would you like to come in at this point? I'd like to invite you to come in, Professor David West.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all very much for taking the time to attend this conversation. And I think it comes at a very auspicious moment, especially when we planned this without really knowing that the CBN would launch the framework yesterday. But I think one of the things we need to be mindful of, and this is one of the contributions Jane made, is how do we make a better business case for women in the industry? And I think this is also one of the pillars of the framework, not just for the women that we're serving, but also for women working in the industry and rising to senior management positions. So yes, we're not trying to say give women different types of breaks, but we're just trying to say that there's opportunities in working with women and there's opportunities in serving women. So let's not discount those opportunities and think that we're only going to work with men. It's not deliberate that we're explicitly leaving out women, but I think the most important thing is the fact that the opportunity is also backed by a sizable market in terms of the numbers that we're looking at. So in Nigeria, for example, we have like a 50-50 split in our population. So if we're deliberately choosing not to pay attention to women, then we're also deliberately choosing to ignore a sizable part of the market. And I like what Omolola also contributed in the fact that across the socioeconomic segments of women, you would find different dynamics and different characteristics that we need to pay attention to. So while we are saying serve women, I think we can also further segment it and saying that let's ensure that we can meet the needs of women as they evolve through their own career paths, as they go from being the single lady at university all the way to being the married woman, the pensioner, the retired, and through that whole life cycle. And if we think of that as an approach in terms of the whole life cycle and the journey, then it's easier, because one thing I know about women is that women are loyal. And that's the loyalty that we're trying to bring and build into our products, into our brands, and into the services that we offer. So we want to say thank you very much for taking the time to join us today on this very important conversation that we're not going to get tired of bringing to your attention. We're going to continue talking about it until we begin to see more deliberate actions and interventions that focus on the female gender in that sense, because we think that that's a big size of the market and we need to scale them up as we go along. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much. Wishing you a very happy independence, and we hope that you will take some time out to reflect on Nigeria as a 60-year-old child. And Chijioke, I accused Chijioke of being mischievous because he shared the link in terms of Nigeria not meeting her financial inclusion targets. And well, we can't, we're not going to blame anybody, but I think it's for us also to use the opportunity to reflect as active members of the ecosystem. What do we need to be doing differently across the different market segments? So the woman market segment is one segment, but there are other segments that we also need to think differently about and do things in a timely and fit for purpose kind of a manner. So thank you very much. And thank you very much, Ijeoma. And thank you for your contributions and your participation. Have a nice evening and happy independence.
Thank you. Happy Independence, everyone. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you, Ijeoma.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ijeoma. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ijeoma. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Shell. Thank you.